Hello, and welcome to Scary Stories from the Web. Today we have three stories, and the first is going to be from Zach Lastry and is called Do Not Open. There is an 18-year-old girl named Patrice who is in her first year of college. She lived alone in a small apartment near her college. One night, she was washing her dishes after dinner when suddenly her phone started ringing. She picked it up and saw by the caller ID that it was her friend Peter. "Hey Pete, what's up?" "Not much. I'm bored and I thought I'd see if you wanted to hang out." "Sure, come on over. We can watch a movie or something." "Cool. I'll be over in 15 or 20 minutes." She hung up the phone and decided to take a shower before her friend arrived. About 10 minutes later, she was in the middle of shampooing her hair when she suddenly heard a knock on her front door. Boom, boom, boom. Sticking her head out of the shower, she shouted, "Come on in, it's open." A few minutes later, the banging on the door started again. Boom, 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 boom. She stuck her head out again. "It's not locked. Just let yourself in." Just then, her phone began to ring again. She answered in an irritated voice. "I'm in the shower. Why don't you stop knocking and come in?" "Don't open the door," Peter shouted. Patrice was shocked. "Why not?" "I'm outside your apartment building," he whispered. "I just saw a strange woman going up the stairs to your apartment. She was crawling up the wall on all fours." Our next scary story is going to be from actually, it's from Aggressive Bedroom 66, and it's Road Trip Scary Story. This happened to me 3 years ago when my family and I went on a road trip to New York. We lived in California, and the plane tickets to New York were really expensive, so my dad decided he would drive there. We were somewhere in Indiana, and it was like 11 p.m. We were on a really deserted road, and we hadn't seen a car in about 20 minutes. Just then, we saw a car stopped on the side of the road. My dad was a really nice guy, and he would always offer help to anyone who needed it. We stopped, and I was annoyed because I was tired and just wanted to get to our hotel. I could see my dad and this other guy talking. The guy looked like a middle-aged man and honestly looked normal. They were talking for a few minutes when I saw my dad going back to the car. He got in the car and gunned it down the road. I was like, what the fuck? That was a very unusual thing for him to do. He did not say a single word for the rest of the ride. We got to our motel about 30 minutes later. My dad never told anyone what he saw until he finally told me last week. Apparently, when he got to the guy's car, the guy said he had a flat tire and asked my dad if he could help for a couple minutes. My dad looked in the back seat of his car and noticed a body bag and a shotgun in the back seat. My dad said he told the guy he would go back to his car and get his tools, and that's when he sped off. This try, I'm assuming that means this guy, was a lot more scarier when I heard the backstory. Who knows what would have happened if we stayed there? Please feel free to ask any questions. And now for our final story, Wishing Well. Many years ago, there is an exclusive boarding school in England that had a scout troop. The leader of the scout troop was a teacher, and one weekend per month, he would take the scouts on a camping trip. There was one young boy in the scout troop who was very disobedient and disruptive. His name was Stanley Jenkins, and he was always getting up to mischief. No matter how many times the teacher had to tell him off, he would never listen. One weekend, the scouts went camping in the English countryside. They got permission to set up camp on a farmer's land. The spot was on a ridge overlooking a deep valley. The teacher warned the boys not to go off wandering on their own and told them that under no circumstance were they allowed to go down into the valley. While the teacher and the other scouts were pitching the tents, Stanley Jenkins and his friends were sitting in the grass. They were too lazy to help set up camp. Instead, they wanted to go look for some type of mischief to get into. As Stanley Jenkins gazed down into the valley, he noticed a field that was surrounded by a barbed wire fence. At one corner of the field, there was an old stone well. It looked like the field was never used, and it was overgrown with weeds and brambles. Just then, they saw the farmer who owned the land coming with his dog. As he passed by, Stanley Jenkins waved at him, and the farmer stopped to talk. "What's that field down there?" asked Stanley Jenkins. "The one with the well inside of it." "That's the wishing well," the farmer replied, "but you're not allowed to go down there. I hope your teacher told you that." "Wishing well," said Stanley Jenkins. "You mean if you throw some money into the well, you can make a wish?" The farmer let out a grim laugh. I wouldn't know, he said. That's what they call it. But nobody around here goes near the wishing well. In all the years that I've lived here, I've never set foot in that field. What's the matter with it? Asked Stanley Jenkins. All I know is the cows and the sheep keep away from it. Even my old dog wouldn't go through the field, and neither should you boys. If you've got a brain in your heads, they say it's haunted. Haunted? Stanley Jenkins scoffed. Haunted by who? 3 women and a man. 3 women and a man, said the farmer gravely. Who are they? Asked Stanley Jenkins. It all happened before my time, said the farmer, but I was told they died in the well, or were found dead in it. I saw them once. It was twilight, and I was standing on this very ridge. My old dog saw them too. They came out of the bushes and went crawling around, 4 of them. Just black rags and old white bones. It seemed as if I could hear their bones clacking as they moved. I couldn't make out their faces. All I could see was their teeth. The boys let out a collective gasp. Stanley Jenkins chuckled. What happened then? He asked. I don't know, said the farmer. My old dog took off running, and I took off running after him. So take my advice, boys. Stay clear of that wishing well if you know what's good for you. With that, the farmer tipped his hat and walked off. The boys stared after him. What a load of bull, said Stanley Jenkins. I don't believe a word of it. The next evening, the teacher gathered the scouts and did a head count. He noticed one of the boys was missing. After doing a roll call, he discovered that the missing boy was Stanley Jenkins. None of the other scouts seemed to have any idea where he was. Then one boy spoke up. Maybe he went down to the wishing well, sir. The teacher's face went pale. The wishing well, he gasped. But you were all given strict rules not to go down there. The scouts followed the teacher as he walked to the top of the ridge and looked down into the valley below. The light was fading and it was getting cold, but there wasn't a breath of air. Can anyone see him? The teacher asked. There he is, said one of the boys, getting over the barbed wire fence. Do you see him? Yes, I see him, said another boy. I recognize his sweater. Now he's making his way towards the wishing well. That little idiot, the teacher growled. At that moment, one of the boys let out a high-pitched scream and covered his eyes. What's that black thing on the path? Cried another boy, crawling on all 4s. It's a woman. Oh, God, don't let me look at her. Stop it, the teacher said loudly. Get a hold of yourselves. I'm going down there. Hancock and Fartably, you run to the farmer's house and call for help. The rest of you boys, stay here and don't move. The teacher ran off, leaving the boys alone on the ridge staring down at the field below. To their horror, they saw another black figure emerge from the bushes, then another and another. They saw Stanley Jenkins making his way towards the wishing well. He didn't seem to notice the black figures approaching him, shuffling forward with their arms outstretched. The boys started yelling as loud as they could, trying to warn him. As he reached the wishing well, Stanley Jenkins seemed to hear their cries. He suddenly stopped and turned around. Then he let out a scream more piercing and dreadful than any of the boys on the ridge. But it was too late. The black figures closed in on him until he was surrounded on all sides. Then they pounced. The boys stared at the scene below in terrified silence. They could hardly breathe as they watched the horrific struggle. The hood of one of the figures fell back, revealing a white skull with stringy wisps of hair. They gnarled. Bony fingers were ripping and tearing at Stanley Jenkins, and soon his awful screaming ceased. The boys spotted their teacher running towards the fields. He scrambled through the barbed wire fence, but then he stopped and wouldn't go any further. The farmer arrived with a number of policemen. The boys pointed down at the field below and screamed, "They got him! They got him!" over and over again. The policemen ran down into the valley. The headmaster arrived, and all of the boys were transported back to the school. Some of them were so traumatized they later left the school. The teacher stayed there with the police all night. The next morning at dawn, they found what was left of Stanley Jenkins at the bottom of the wishing well. He had been torn to pieces. His parents came to collect the remains. The farmer put another barbed wire fence encircling the field and erected large signs with danger and keep out written in large red letters. Locals in the area say that the field is now haunted by 5 ghostly black figures: 3 women, a man, and a young boy. And that's going to do it today for this video, guys. If you enjoyed, please, hit a like or subscribe, and stick around for the next video, because there's going to be more of these coming, and I'm going to drastically try to improve this as much as I can through the following videos. So thank you, guys.